I'm Alyson Shelton, and I'm in the garden.
Let's explore creative minds at the panel garden. See what blooms, see what we find at the panel garden. Comics, cartoons, from old and new, bloody paints, writers, editors, and art. Picking all their minds apart, with evil web as adorable as it gets.
So Alyson, you are the writer of Reburn. This series looks super exciting. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, it's Reburn follows a woman named May who has superpowers, and issue 1, it starts off and she's in a situation that's not a good situation, and we quickly see her get out of it. And the first arc and really the whole series concerns itself with her getting back what she's lost. For me, this comic, I came to it because I was really I've always been interested in female protagonists and women and power and rage and what happens when a woman has more power than anyone else, and what are the consequences of that, and who wants to take it, and how does that all play out. So what I like about it is that it's grounded in relationships and these questions. And yes, she has superpowers, so it's visually really stunning. And hopefully we find a balance between the narrative and the characters, and then these really exciting action moments or spectacles.
And who are who's the creative team on this one?
So I wrote and created it. And then the story behind it is a friend I've had for years. Our first job in LA was together. Her name is Jessica Patel, and she is a TV producer. And so I had showed her the script for this because she just kind of reads whatever I write because we've known each other a long time. And she was at the time working on a comic book property. And she was like, wow, this would make a really great comic book. Do you think you'd want to do that? And I was like, yes, I love comic books. I think it would too, but I have no idea how to even begin to do that. And I was just overwhelmed, honestly, with the notion of finding an artist and a colorist and all the pieces that you need. So we started working together, and then we brought on Elise McCall, who's the artist. And in issue 1, she's also the colorist. But in issue 2, Hilary Jenkins starts coloring. And then Joe McGill's the letterer, and Ruth Alano did additional coloring and sensitivity reading. So that's the team. And Elise and I work really closely together, and she's just a dream. I can't say enough about her. She is an incredible talent, but she's also a wonderful collaborator, and she brings so much to the process and to the characters and the world. And when I first saw the pencils for issue 1, I pretty much just cried because it was like,
oh, wow.
To have something that's been in my head. I've worked on some of these characters for years, and to see them through her eyes, it's really gratifying. Writing can be such a solitary pursuit. So to have somebody who's doing it with you, it's a real gift. I feel very grateful.
So, in your opinion, what makes for a high quality collaboration?
For me, I know it's very personal, but I think you have to have a lot of respect for one another's artistic and creative ideas and talents. And I think I need everyone to believe that we make each other better and to not feel threatened by ideas or thoughts, but to feel like they're opportunities. I think if you come at it with that, you're bound to make something great.
I think that might actually be like seriously one of the best answers to that question we've ever gotten.
Thank you. I really feel it in my bones. I love collaborating. It's like, it's the thing. It's like the reason you do this for me.
Your origin story is actually pretty interesting. How did you get started as a writer?
I first started writing in a way that I would like classify as writing, which is a struggle I've had to even consider myself a writer. In college, I started writing. I wanted to do this program that was called Creative Writing for the Media, and it was for screenplays and television writing, which seemed very exotic or very like, oh, I can learn to do that. So I did that, and I loved it. And then I went to graduate school at USC in it's now called Cinematic Arts, and I wrote screenplays there and directed. And then I made an indie feature film that I wrote and directed, and then I stopped. I had kids. I was completely overwhelmed with business and all of the harassment and trauma that came with it, and I was just happy to step away. And then when both of my kids went to elementary school, I thought, okay, I think I'm going to do this again. I think I'm going to write, but just what I want to write for my friends and myself. And Jessica was one of those friends. And she was just like, the whole time I wasn't writing, it's like, well, when you decide to start writing again, I want to read whatever you write. And I had another friend, Jen, who was produced the film that I made. And she said the same thing. And just having two people who cared, it seems small, but it was a lot to me. And so I started writing again, and I wrote this screenplay and another screenplay. And then I started writing memoir essays. So I'm doing that, and I'm just kind of doing what calls to me instead of trying to fit myself in some kind of box of what I should be writing, because that didn't work. So even though it was really frustrating, I think the flip side of that is liberation.
What kind of writer are you? Are you one of those people who sits and tightly plots every aspect of your script, or do you just write and go?
I think sometimes I'm both. It really depends on the piece. Sometimes I know the ending. Sometimes I know a line of dialogue. When I was writing Reburn, obviously there's broad strokes that I know. And from the beginning, and this is true with anything I write at this point, it's like this, I want to write something that I want to read or see. So I know I want there to be a certain amount of action or stunning visual sequences. I want there to be great dialogue and characters. And I always, someone like teased me years ago, I always end up writing about love because it is, it matters a lot to me. And that can take so many different forms. There isn't one kind of, it doesn't have to be romantic love. It's just, for me, that's the thing that keeps me going. And it can be love for your children, your partner, the earth, your community. But I care about that. And I think it's also tied into faith, having this larger belief that it doesn't all just end with me. I'm just part of it.
Sure. How do you approach inclusion in your work?
Even back before that was really even a phrase that was being used, it was something I thought about because, you grow up watching movies, and for the most part, you're watching white people do things. and you're mostly watching stories told by, white cis het men. And I really had to look for women to admire. And I would gather them up, like they're some kind of rare jewel, and think, okay, this is possible for me. And then think about what that's like for an Asian American woman or a queer person or trans. Like, I didn't have that many choices, and most of the people look like me. So, I'm not really that interested in telling stories that aren't inclusive, because at this point, I'm grateful my life is very inclusive. I live in a community that's full of all kinds of people, and those are the communities I feel the most inspired by. And I feel like those are the stories that aren't told enough, and you want to make space for someone that's not just like you. I think that's a joy of creating stories. You can create something that's larger than yourself, and that's part of it.
When you're writing, you've got all these characters just sort of bubbling around in your head. Where do they find their voices?
It's a great question. I think some of them are parts of me, parts of people in my life, things that keep me wondering, things that I want to consider further. I think those are characters, situations that intrigue me, dynamics that aren't easily deconstructed. Because I find relationships endlessly fascinating. I wouldn't have used this term to describe myself until fairly recently, a people pleaser, because there were so many people that didn't like me. So I assumed I couldn't possibly be one. But for the people who did like me, I think I did a lot of twisting myself into the right shape to be of use. And it makes me a really good listener. But I also genuinely love hearing people's stories. And I find the human condition, it's either just deeply sad or fascinating. And I'm trying to stick with fascinating. So I think I just mull things that fascinate me and hope that others are interested as well.
So, Reburn #1 and #2 both had successful Kickstarters with them. And congratulations on that. That is, wow, that is just crazy. Is it nerve-wracking? What's it like to work with Kickstarter on funding a project?
It's such a specific thing. It's funny. My one of the friends who helped out, Anjali Bhamani, she's featured. She's a voice actor for video games, and she's an actress. And so she shared our campaign and is involved in our campaign. And she's doing one right now for her own book. And she keeps texting me, and it's just like, it's very stressful. And she's raising a ton of money, and she knows, and she has, hundreds of thousands of followers. And so it's funny to me that she's going through the exact same thing, because I think sometimes you think, well, if I had like more followers, or if I had more, it would be easier, but it's the same thing. It is stressful, and it is a gamble, and you have to balance like getting it out there with being a real pain. It's like, hey, my thing's happening. Please come through. And I just sort of took it as like, because I had taken time off when I had kids, and I do know a lot of people professionally because of film school and my work before I had kids, I took it as like this is my opportunity to just like let people know what I'm doing. I'm not going to say back it or whatever. I'm just going to be like, look, I did this thing. And that
Awesome.
was a much better approach for me, because I really wasn't like invested in whether they backed it or not. I just felt like, I'm proud of this. I want to share it with them. If they back it, that's obviously a bonus, but it's not the goal. The goal is to let them know I am doing something I'm proud of, and here it is.
So does the act of creating a comic change the way you approach the medium as a fan?
I think anytime you make anything, it gives you a greater appreciation for the product, or at least that's my experience, having made a film, a comic book, been on sets, done, different things. You see what a miracle it is that anyone finishes anything, especially in the indie space.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, because it's time, it's money, it's it's like believing in yourself, like that you don't just go, oh my God, like who cares? That you keep doing it. I think it's just made me more of a fan, and I definitely appreciate colors more than I did. I would just be like, oh, I like this, and I would kind of have a general idea, but it is an art form.
Oh yeah, it's really something, and it's subtle. You don't even know it's there until you're involved with it.
Yeah, and so rarely is it realistic. And I think it's so good. Oftentimes you don't think about the fact that it's not realistic. And then you go back and you're like, oh, their skin's purple. That never happens. But you just like are in it and you don't think about it. And actually that's true of lettering too. I have a much deeper appreciation for lettering, because when it's done well, you barely notice it. But if it's not done well, you don't know what to read or how to read it.
It's really something. Sort of the process of hosting this show has made me like way more aware of all the different things that people I talk to do, like letterers and editors. I mean, if you would have asked me like 10 years ago, I could not have told you, I don't think, in any reasonable, accurate way, what an editor does or what a colorist really is responsible for.
And everything's different. It's not like because when I wrote the script, there were all these different formats I could follow. It's not like there's one format for a script or one formula for an artist-writer collaboration or inker-colorist relationship, or, it's really project-based. Because at one point I said to Elise, like, oh, is this working for you? This script, whatever format or something. And she's like, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it, because it works for me, and like, that's really the point. It doesn't matter if it works for anyone else. It just needs to work for her in this project. And that was really liberating, because it's just like, oh, okay, this is about the two of us. Okay. She's wonderful. I want to just say, like, we had the benefit, I guess, of COVID. We had a lot of time to talk, which we wouldn't now, because there was just nothing happening at that beginning time. And we talked a lot, and not just about the comic or art, about life and what we'd experienced and what mattered to us. And I feel like it shows up in the work. And I'm so grateful to have that relationship. Life can be really like serendipitous sometimes. And I feel that way about our relationship, the way it's developed.
That's awesome.
It really is. It was a real bright spot during COVID. And I was grateful to have bright spots.
Oh, totally. What makes a story memorable? Well, what makes for a good comic reading experience?
That is so personal. My husband and I talk about it quite a lot, because there are certain comics we both love. There are some he loves. There's some I like more. And then, of course, there's tons we don't even read, because there are so many great comics out there.
It's hard to keep up with.
You can't, right? You just have to like say, okay, I'm going to read this. Both of us care a lot about the art. And neither one of us is super into tons of writing, which is, I know, a personal thing. Like, some people love comic books where they're like, man, I got my money's worth. Like, there's so many words. We are not those people. A satisfying comic book experience is, I think for me, actually, a lot of satisfying artistic experiences are, it takes me somewhere I didn't expect it to take me, but doesn't feel not earned. There are beautiful panels or pages or pieces of dialogue that I feel like, oh, I could never do that. That's so perfect. And it transports me. It takes me out of my life for a minute. And if it's really great, it makes me think about something, but not in a way that feels like homework, in a way that just feels like, oh, like that sort of like flash of, oh, that. I think that is like, obviously that's a really special piece of art that can do that. But those things, those things are great to me.
You are such a great guest. That is an amazing answer.
Oh, thank you. That's really lovely to say. Your questions are so, I love them because they just make me think about things in different ways. And you leave so much space for the answers, which I appreciate. I don't feel like pressure to like, okay, 10 words, answer that question. So thank you.
Well, theoretically, we have like this unlimited,
Right.
time that we could do this. So that's
Right.
that's fine. How do you feel about the medium? When I say that, I mean like paper versus digital. What's your experience?
We still buy paper. And it's not just about the physical experience. Like, we have relationships with comic stores. And my husband and I joke, like, COVID, he really missed going in on Wednesday and picking up his books and seeing his friends. And it's a community. So there's that. And then I also I like the paper. And it's funny because I just got the proof for issue 2 today, and it looks different. It looks different from the digital proof. The colors, they're just gorgeous, and they resonate with me in a different way. Not to say I don't read digital comics. I do. Of course I do. But I do really love paper comics. I mean, that may speak to my age, but and I love the feeling of flipping through them. And I never read the letters page in a digital comic, but I would in a paper comic.
Really?
Yeah, I just more like, I don't know. I'm just more immersed in it. And like my husband will read his comics and then he'll give them to me. They'll be like on my side of bed, and then I'll read them and then we'll talk about them. And like with digital, there's not that same visceral, like, hey, I read this, check it out, and how quickly they go from his side to my side speaks to the ones that were really into, if he's like putting it on my side of the bed Wednesday night, okay, that means it's really good. He already read it and he wants me to read it. So it's just, I feel like I have a relationship with paper comics. But I read a lot of digital comics with our kids because we can go back and read like, oh, let's read Kelly Thompson's run on, the one I'm totally blanking on. God, it's about to be Hawkeye. Like let's go read that whole run. We can do that so easily.
It's a classic run too.
Oh, it's so good.
Just so good.
It's like, I'm hoping that's what the show's about. I think it might be what the show's about. I'm like, because she's great as a writer, and I love the way she wrote Kate. So it's just that's a fun one.
Do you have a favorite type of story to tell?
I wasn't sure to watch or to read or to tell. Favorite type. I mean, like I said earlier, definitely I always write female protagonists, which have become more popular over the years. When I was first beginning to write them, it was like, oh, brother.
They're more fun to read. Guys are boring.
Oh, I obviously I agree. And there's so much more area that hasn't been mined. Like with men, you're like, oh, I know we've seen it. We've been doing this for, decades,
totally.
Generations. But when I was in film school, I mean, on the regular, guys would be like, oh, is it another Lifetime movie, Alyson? It's like, okay, I think that's supposed to be a burn. But if someone's paying me to write something, then I will take their money and be thrilled. So
yeah. But on the other hand, I mean, have these guys never seen a Lifetime movie? Holy shit, they are amazing.
And so much
I
happens.
love Lifetime movies. I seriously subscribe to the online movie club just because I can't get enough Girl with Amnesia films.
Well, so much happens. And that's like, oh, so the burn is like, there's tons of things that happen and you never know what's going to happen next. Okay. I mean, it was just.
I mean, even when they give you the ending at the beginning, you still don't know how it's going to turn out.
I have a friend who writes Lifetime movies. I'll have to tell her you said that. She will be gratified. Yeah, I'm very interested in that. I think, I often write about people with a lot of issues, trauma issues, that they are working through, whether it's through action or relationships or therapy. I grew up with a lot of trauma. And so that's something that I've been unpacking my whole life. And it helps. It helps to write about it. It helps to write a scene about a woman, as I do in the first issue of Reburn, killing her abuser. It felt good. It felt good to me. It felt good to Elise. All of us were like, this is the best. And it's cathartic. And I was just recently watching a mafia film, which you can probably guess what it was if you think very hard. And I was like, man, I'm so tired of these movies where all the women get killed. Like, I just don't need to see another one. I know what's going to happen. She's going to talk too much, and then they're going to get rid of her. And I was saying to, this is related, but seems like a tangent. I was saying to Elise at one point when I was writing Reburn, every character that showed up who wasn't like a main character, I made them a woman, because I was like, why not? Why not fill the page with women? When does that happen? And that's
Rarely.
And we're so used to just seeing, oh, it's a room full of people. All the women are main characters or important, and everyone else is a man. And so I thought, well, let's do the opposite. The only men in this room are ones we know, and everyone else is a woman. And it just feels good to get to make that choice. And I just like to tell stories that make me feel empowered. Like I have choices, and the choices I make mean something. And it's not just what my characters are doing, but it's what I'm doing as a creator. And that could be anything. We contain multitudes. And I try to do that with my stories. I try not to be one thing. I try to be all the things that I want to be. And I think that made it really difficult for me at the beginning, because people really wanted me to do one thing. So I just stopped doing one thing.
When you're writing, how do you engineer conflict?
I think it happens pretty organically, because I create fairly dynamic people who are inevitably going to be frustrated or irritated or come in with enough history that they're going to need to work that out. I think that conflict seems, especially right now, to be fairly natural in life. I try to show up in the middle or toward the end, not the beginning. And that was definitely something with Reburn. We're starting not at the beginning. And I think that you're inclined to have more conflict after a lot of stuff has passed between all these characters. And then they're trying to figure out how to move forward, instead of being like, well, here's Jane and here's Nancy, and they've just met each other. Conflict's a little harder to have in that moment. But if they've been friends for 30 years, you're going to have conflict, period. I try to jump in midstream.
Nice. So Reburn's an ongoing series. How far have you gotten in creating it so far?
So far, so we've Kickstarted 1 and 2. 2 is being printed. 3 is being inked. And 4 has been written. So that's the first arc. And we're going to Kickstart 3 and 4 at the same time in 2022. And I think we're going to check in with ourselves and see how much more we have to give. But there's plenty more story to tell. First of all, it's a big world, and there's a lot of different pieces of it and characters. So we could easily do spinoffs with different characters, or, explore backstory. There's a lot of potential. And it's been so fun, because the first issue takes place in one locale, then the second's in another, then the third's in another, and seeing the world building. It's Elise is incredibly good at it, and she sent the pencils for issue 3, and it's set in the Citadel, which is the first urban place that we visit in the book, and it's so good. I was just she really knocked it out of the park, and I emailed her all kinds of praise, and she's like, yeah, I'm just really feeling this one. And
Nice.
and I can tell. It's just like, she said to me in the first phone call that we had, because we were just like talking about, oh, do you want to do it? That kind of like first meet and greet kind of thing. And she was like, oh, I love this script because something actually happens. She's like, I know that seems like a weird thing to say, but you'd be surprised how many scripts I get sent where I'm like, why is this a comic book?
Oh my God, you have no idea. Like, first issues all over the place. Everybody sends me the review copies and I love them to death, but I can't tell you how awesome, or how often rather, I see a first issue and I'm like, okay, great, when's the story start?
Yeah. Totally. And it's funny because some of the comments I've got is like, wow, you really start with a lot of action. Like, are you worried you'll lose the reader? And I was like, I love comic books where they throw you in, as long as I feel like they have me and they're not going to just throw me into just utter chaos. And then at the end, I'm going to just feel like roughed up and confused. I love that because that's what I'm here for. It's a comic book, it's not a how-to manual. I don't want to know the steps that got us here right now. I want to figure it out. And I like to feel smart. Like, ooh, I knew that was going to happen. So hopefully we do that. That's kind of the goal of like, oh yeah, I thought that guy was weird or whatever. So we start off with an explosion and then there's more, and it's fun. I mean, it's a fun, I'm really happy with it. There are moments when it's like, it gets really overwhelming, all the kickstarting and all the, and like, we started a business. We didn't realize we were starting a business. You're kind of just like, oh, we're doing this thing. Oh, wait a minute. This is a whole thing. But then I like look at the proof today and I get all like misty and we made something, and with people that I just admire, and it's thrilling. I'm just grateful.
That's just awesome.
It is.
Did you want to do the active fan questions?
Sure.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite single issue story or title of all time?
Wow.
Pick your babies.
Favorite single issue. I should have studied for this. Because
I'm sorry.
I know it's okay. I listened to Carla Daffy, because she's been super lovely friend and supporter. So I was like, I'm going to listen to her episode.
The good news is the sound quality's gotten way better since then.
Oh. She's such a great guest. And she's a really lovely person. And yeah. But I didn't get this far in her episode. God, single issue. Well, my favorite, I'm just going to say right now, my favorite series is Black Widow.
Nice.
And that's a great number one. Speaking of number ones. And that's not my favorite of all time. That's hard. I have to be like, what are my favorite? I really love Y the Last Man. That was the first comic book I got into, like really got into. And the show was kind of breaking my heart, but I love that. And I loved Brian Michael Bendis's Alias back then too. Those are my first two comic books. And so I always have to sort of name check them, because obviously Y the Last Man is populated with women. And I found that really inspiring. And Jessica Jones was a badass. And nice. I loved her. And currently it's like when Black Widow shows up, I think it's gorgeous. Like, I think Elena Casagrande's work is impeccable, and the writing, I think it's so inspiring. And I love their double page spreads. Every issue, they have a double page spread that's like, yeah, it's the kind of feeling of like, oh, and that actually is a huge difference between paper and digital as well. I don't feel like double page spreads work the same digitally. On a device, it isn't the same experience as like flipping your comic and going like, yeah, it's not, it's this. And I see it, especially as we format our digital issues of Reburn, because we have a double page spread in issue 2, and we had one in issue 1. And it's like, we'd see it and we're like, okay, yeah, that looks right. And then you see it in the book and you're like, yeah, that's what it was meant to do. So that is something I really love about paper, and Black Widow does it so well. So I'm giving Kelly Thompson love.
It's totally okay.
I think she's really great.
She is. She's neat people, and her Twitter is so much fun.
Yeah, she's inspiring. Spider-Man,
She is.
apparently.
Yeah.
Gotta start reading that.
It's good stuff.
I don't know if that answered your question. Sorry.
No, it totally did. Totally did. That was a great, nice, long, valid answer.
Okay. It's like, oh God, favorite. My husband would have like an answer for sure. Like Fantastic Four number, whatever. Okay. Go ahead.
So when was the last time a comic made you cry?
Well, Saga made me cry a lot, but that was a while ago. You know, it would have been like a graphic memoir that made me cry, which I really love, which is different than comic books. But I read this book, Dancing at the Pity Party, which is by Tyler Fader, who's a artist, and she writes about losing her mother, and it's just her whole journey with grief. And I thought it was beautiful and funny, and my brother died when I was young, and so I've carried grief with me, and I've never read anything quite like it. Probably that. I mean, I know that's kind of cheating, but it's graphic, so I'm going to go with that.
That's totally valid. That counts. I'll take it. Is there anybody that you could think of that is involved in comics that you think of as either the most underrated or most inspiring creator of all time?
Wow. Underrated.
Mm-hmm.
That's tricky. I feel like a lot of the people I read are very, very appreciated. I have to give Brian K. Vaughan love, even though he is not underappreciated. But because of Why the Last Man and Paper Girls and Saga,
Yeah, such a good writer.
yeah, and he writes women who are interesting, and I didn't read Paper Girls and be like, "Are you kidding me with this?" Like, why did you write a series about a bunch of teenage girls? I was just like, "This is great." I'm in. And I really like Kelly Thompson. I can't come up with underrated. And now I feel like, again, I should have done my homework. I need to have underrated for next time.
No, it's totally okay.
That's such a great
It was
effort.
underrated or inspiring, so you're totally okay.
Underrated is like such an opportunity to like shout out to someone. So I have to do that next time.
Right on. Well, it looks like we're up against the end of the show.
Okay.
Are you ready for the fun part?
Okay. Yes.
Sweet. So, is there a particular Ninja Turtle that you see yourself as?
Oh my God. Leonardo?
Okay. That's valid.
What the Ninja Turtle are you, or what Ninja Turtle do you see me as after this interview? Did I surprise you with Leonardo? Do you feel like sure?
I was thinking you were like sort of more of a Donatello, thoughtful and creative.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah. Different phases in your life, you're different turtles. Is that part of how it works, maybe?
I have always been sort of more of a Michelangelo myself.
You never really were like, oh, those were the days when I was a Leonardo. Okay.
I mean, cowabunga.
Words to live by. Now I'm going to go ask my family. So if I was a Ninja Turtle, which one would I be? And see what they say. And be like, man.
If you got a Batman-style utility belt,
Oh, man.
what would you put in it?
Oh. So does it need to be like batarangs? Like, does it need to be bat-affiliated things in my utility belt?
It could be anything
Okay.
that reflects you as a character.
Just making sure. How deep my Batman knowledge needs to be. I would really like one of those. I'm so not going to say the right word, and there is a word for it, but like where you can hook it onto the top of the building and then be able to like jump from building to building, like kind of simulate flying, because I've always really wanted to fly. And I can't, regrettably, only in my dreams. I would like that. I would also like, is there some kind of like invisibility device so that you can just not deal with certain people? I would like,
Ooh.
I would like something like that.
No, I love that idea.
And related. I think I would like something that could like replicate or be like some kind of comfort object so that people don't need to hug me, but I can just be like, here's this thing. Hug this thing. It's almost like the real thing. That's what I need.
No, that's beautiful.
That's my utility belt. Those would be life-changing devices.
Awesome. What criteria do you look for in a sidekick or minion?
Oh. I would have to say sidekick because I'm not pro minion.
Okay.
My sidekick is probably my husband and children, and the skill that I really needed and have is, I mean, it's so corny, but why not end corny? But just like honesty, support, safety. I think of taking it back to Hawkeye, like whenever Kate gets hurt, actually both of them in those runs, they get out frozen peas and they ice their wounds with them. And it's like, you want the person who buys you frozen peas and gets them out of the freezer for you and says it was totally worth it.
Nice.
Whatever nonsense you just did, you made the right call.
That's awesome.
So a frozen pea holder purchaser?
Or somebody who thinks to do that.
Right. I'm often the frozen pea purchaser, so I'm probably, projecting a little, hey.
No, that sounds amazing. So what inspires you?
I think it goes back to my answer about why I write or what I write. What inspires me is questions that remain unanswered for me. It's like untangling my own unanswerable questions and making sense of the world and hopefully entertaining people and getting them to turn the page and feel seen. If I can help someone feel seen, then I've done something worthwhile.
Where do you find joy?
My kids and nature. I love the beach. I love to hike. I have spent a lot of time alone. Starting as a kid, when I couldn't handle life, I would go stare at the water and feel like there's something bigger than me. And I've heard people say when they stare at the ocean, they feel so small. And that makes them feel insignificant. And to me, that was always so comforting. I wanted to be insignificant. I like feeling like, oh, all of this is bigger than me. I love that. So I feel inspired when I realize, oh, I'm just this little thing doing my thing. I'm not in charge of like some huge world-changing event. I'm just doing this. And that's enough.
So congratulations, you've defeated Thanos. You are now in...
Hooray! Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So you are now in possession of the Infinity Gauntlet.
It's a lot of power.
You have the ability to bend reality to your whims.
Wow.
What, if anything, do you do with it?
Wow, that's a really hard one. If you're like a morally responsible individual. Is there like a way to make everyone like themselves and be full of self-acceptance so we can all stop like hating each other so much?
I don't know.
That's how I would want to bend reality. I would want us all to stop like believing that someone else has them it out for them and realize like, most people are just trying to make it through the day. There isn't some like worldwide conspiracy that's trying to like snuff the life out of you, although there is for some people. There are systems that have done that.
Yeah.
And could I get rid of those systems? That would be miraculous.
Sure.
That seems like a worthwhile use of the Infinity Gauntlet. I would do that. Let's see what equity is really like.
Oh, totally.
I'm here for it.
No, it's great. It's great. So, Alyson, this has just been the most awesome show. I've really enjoyed doing it with you.
I have too.
Where can people find you online?
I have a website, Alyson Shelton, which is ALYSONSHELTON.com. And there you can see links to my essays and links to the Reburn website. We also have a website, reburncomic.com. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter at by Alyson Shelton.
And now it's time to go. Wasn't that fun? The Panel Garden is a show about the things we love. And if you're feeling super generous, feel free to go to buymeacoffee.com/EvaIsAdorable. There, you can support what we do by chipping in as little as $1. Not financially able? That's okay. Shares on social media and reviews on your favorite podcast listening platforms help us a ton. In any case, thanks for being awesome. The show is produced and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. Opening theme by Antonia Marquis and Tyler Scott. Closing theme by Mikey Flash of Speed Force Music. The credits are read by the awesome and talented Kat Bertano. That's me. The Panel Garden is a production of Unicorn Fight Industries. Join us next time for another exciting adventure in cyberspace. See you then. Bye!